So tonight we're going to be talking about the four Brahma Viharas, which are translated as the divine abodes or the immeasurable minds. And these are loving kindness, which is metta, compassion, which is karuna, sympathetic joy, which is mudita, and equanimity, which is upekkha. And a mind pervaded by the four Brahma Viharas is described by the Buddha as an awakened mind. Tai says the divine abodes are a practice that must begin with ourselves. For example, we must learn to love ourselves unconditionally, to love others in a way that's not contingent on others being lovable. And we have to have compassion for ourselves before we really can show compassion for others. And why the divine abodes? Well, according to Nyamponika Thera, these four attitudes are said to be excellent or sublime because they are the right or ideal way of conduct toward living beings. They are the great removers of tension, the great peacemakers in social conflict, the great healers of wounds suffered in the struggle of existence. They level social barriers, build harmonious communities, awaken slumbering magnanimity long forgotten, revive joy and hope long abandoned, and promote human brotherhood against the forces of egotism. Sounds like something we could really use in this day and age, doesn't it? It's amazing. And they're called abodes because they can become the mind's constant dwelling place. An abode is a dwelling place. It can be a place where we feel at home, instead of a place that we rarely visit. I know that compassion sometimes is a place that I don't visit that often. It's not a normal, everyday part of me. But a consistent meditation practice can help the divine abodes sink into our heart so deeply that they become spontaneous attitudes and not really easily overthrown. So what I'd like to do tonight is take a look at each of the divine abodes and also talk a little bit about their near enemies so we can understand what they really are. So the first divine abode is love or metta. And love is simply the will to let go. The far enemy of love, obviously, is hatred. The near enemy of love, and a near enemy is something that looks like the divine abode, but is not really the divine abode. So the near enemy of love is clinging, which means that we're not standing on our own 2 feet in giving love. We're holding on to somebody. And it often happens that person we cling to is not real thrilled that we're clinging. It's not especially pleasant. Craving in Pali is islobha, which sounds rather like the English word for love. And because the entire world revolves around wanting to have, we also interpret love this way, that I want to have, I love pizza, I love this, I love that. So we want to have things, but that's craving, that's really not love. Because love is the will to give. So love is my willingness to be happy that my son lives up in Minneapolis when I really want him here in Madison. So we've had a lot of Dharma talks recently on loving kindness, so I'm not going to go into a lot of detail here because we've got 4 divine abodes to talk about. But there really is a great value in practicing loving kindness, and when you do so, practicing with all the different groups, yourself, a person you love, a neutral person, a difficult person, in the whole world. I must admit that I kind of skip over the neutral person and the whole world But I've been slowly in my metta practice adding the different groups in, and every time I do, I look at myself and say, oh, that really does add a lot of value to your practice. Why weren't you doing that all along? So at some point, the others will become part of my practice. Just don't know exactly when. The second divine abode is compassion, or karuna. And when love meets pain and stays loving, it turns into compassion. We might be tempted to see compassion just as a feeling or an emotional response we occasionally experience when we're touched by an encounter with an acute pain. But compassion is really a way of engaging with the fragile and unpredictable world that we live in. We need to look deeply within ourselves to nurture the courage, balance, patience, and wisdom that enable us to care. One of the biggest obstacles to our caring is that we live in the grip of there's not enough time. So the near enemies of compassion, one they call idiot compassion, and that's when you have enabling behaviors. You feel sorry for someone, so you enable them. Another is pity, and none of us want to be pitied. Pity is when care is kind of torqued, that I'm better than you, so I will feel compassion for you, but you're lower than me. In our hierarchical minds that we have, we often create that kind of hierarchy. And the other one is distancing. I'm the helper. So I'm not connected to you, but I'm the helper of you. And those are really not compassion, although at first glance they may look like compassion. There are 2 steps to cultivating compassion. The first is being willing to turn toward suffering and be touched by it. And when I read this, I realized for myself, if Walt is watching something on TV and there's any violence on it at all, I go like this or I leave the room because I have not been willing to turn toward suffering. It's been an aversion of mine. I don't know how I'm going to change that, but we'll see how that goes. So that's the first step. And then the second step is responding with care. And that care doesn't mean that you have to take care of everybody and fix it for them. The step of caring could be as simple as forming a prayer, sending loving kindness, or just being there with them. It doesn't have to be some kind of act of service. So our compassion grows out of our willingness to meet pain first rather than flee from it. And I'm going to talk in November, I believe it is, on compassion. So I will tell a little bit more of my story of fleeing from pain in that Dharma talk. The third is sympathetic joy, or mudita. And that's the ability to take active delight in others' good fortune or good deeds. The Dalai Lama speaks of mudita as a kind of enlightened self-interest. As he puts it, there are so many people in this world that it's simply reasonable to make their happiness as important as your own. If you can be happy when good things happen to others, your opportunities for delight are increased 6 billion to 1. Its far enemy is envy, which really consists of greed and hatred. The near enemies of sympathetic joy are hypocrisy, pretending to oneself and others, which we sometimes believe is necessary, but that seems real, but is it really truly necessary? And excitement. And excitement brings with it a restlessness and a contracted urge for more. Joy results from curiosity. It feels much smoother, and it's really more open than it is contracted. Joy arises from being attentive and from being curious. Excitement, on the other hand, requires something to happen to us or requires us to procure something that we want. So we must do something to get what we want with excitement. So when I was driving to Milwaukee to give my granddaughters their beautiful Halloween costumes and was very excited to see their face. That really was excitement, not joy. Luckily, they didn't disappoint me. Their faces lit up, so that was good. But again, that was excitement. I needed to get something rather than really joy. In Teachings on Love, Thai writes, a deeper definition of the word mudita is a joy that is filled with peace and contentment. We rejoice when we see others happy, but we rejoice in our own well-being as well. How can we feel joy for another person when we do not feel joy for ourselves? Feeling joy for ourselves, however, is not always real easy to do. The biggest obstacles to feeling joy are the negativity that we hold toward ourselves and toward others. So when you judge yourself or compare yourself or envy others, you perpetuate a sense of aloneness and a deficiency. So it can be hard to be truly open to joy. I was very surprised at my last mindfulness meditation teacher training week that on Wednesday, Tuesday was a tough day. We were talking about conflict and everyone was very emotional about it. And we saw the agenda for Wednesday was joy. Everyone was like, oh good, it's going to be an easy day for everybody but me. Which was really surprising because we didn't exercise just answering the question, tell me what makes you happy? And you did it for 2 minutes. And I was paired with someone and she went first and she was saying things like freedom and world peace and all of these really deep things, or at least that I thought was really deep. And I started comparing myself to her and feeling deficient. Because what I was thinking of that my answers was Walt, Winnie, Evie, Sadie, Guthrie, Derek, Ryan, Callie, Paul, my kids, my grandkids, their spouses. It was all people, my sisters, nothing like world peace. And I started thinking, oh, I must be very superficial or whatever. So it made me really sad to think about happy. I didn't allow myself to be happy. But mudita is non-judgmental, and it allows others to find happiness in things that you might not find happiness. So it's okay if you find happiness in something that I wouldn't. And then the fourth is equanimity, or upekkha. And the Buddha called the fourth and the last of these motions the greatest jewel of all. Equanimity is the ability to be spacious and peaceful as things arise and as they pass. It's a perfect, unshakable balance of the mind, rooted in insight. It's the seventh factor of enlightenment, and its far enemy is excitement. The near enemies are indifference, and I've really struggled over the years with equanimity and indifference. As a matter of fact, my daughter, I was telling her that a talk was on equanimity, and she goes, well, why would you want that? You wouldn't enjoy life, because equanimity often connotes indifference. But indifference is really based on intentional unconcern or fear, and it's displayed as a lack of caring. Another near enemy is withdrawal, and that is really turning away from pain and conflict into a protective shell. In an article in Lion's Roar, Aya Kemen said, equanimity means that we already have enough insight so that nothing seems worth getting worked up over anymore. It is based on the realization that everything that takes place also passes away again. So, what do I lose? The worst that can happen is the loss of my life. But I'll lose that in any event. So what's all the excitement about? In general, people who cause problems for us don't exactly want to kill us. They just want to confirm their ego. But that's not our business. It's wholly and entirely theirs. So equanimity, if your heart has cultivated equanimity, the seeds of discord don't germinate, because I realize that's their business, not mine. And equanimity creates a non-reactive space that we can live in that allows us to recognize what's really going on and break any habit energy cycle that we may be caught up in. Another thing about equanimity is that we typically have a habit to steamroll over our moments of equanimity. We don't even notice them. We really want to savor them and not really grasp or resist them, but savor them. So one practice is to become aware of moments of equanimity, or as Ty would say, the moments of the non-toothache. Equanimity is the crown and culmination of the 4 sublime states. For love to be true love, it must contain compassion, joy, and equanimity. For compassion to be true compassion, it has to have love, joy, and equanimity. True joy has to contain love, compassion, and equanimity. And true equanimity has to have love, compassion, and joy.